Hello and welcome. My name is Alan. We are back with more Autobiography of a Freedom Rider. We are getting through the book. As you can see, there is not a whole lot left. So maybe a few more episodes. But we are going to pick up from the last episode here. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Later that fall of 1961, I went home to Lucas one weekend. I can remember telling my mother about my new friend, Joan, and her commitment to the struggle, um, and to mankind in general. Mother was distraught. I could just see her mind racing back in time as she cried, "Oh Lord, son, what are you about to do? Please don't get involved. Don't you realize where you are? These white folks will never let you and your friends stay here. You bring her here and they will kill you deader than a doornail." I could see her hurt in her eyes. I could even see the hurt that her mother went through, loving mankind while living among people who attempted to lynch her husband, my grandfather. Of course, I was already in the hot seat with the Mississippi White Citizens Council and the KKK in southern Mississippi. My family and I knew that certain people were trying to find me. And if they did, I would not live to see another day, especially if they found me in the company of a white woman. I had to make hard choices, although really the choice had already been made for me. Dad was quick to back Mother up, saying, "Please don't bring your friend here, because the white folks are aware of your activities, so please don't put her in that situation. Don't put yourself in that situation. I want you to leave this place. They could kill everybody here, including your mother and me. I couldn't leave. I just can't," I told him. To which Mother insisted, "Yes, you can. If you stay here, they will kill you. Dad is right. They could kill all of us." And Dad gave the final decree: "Don't bring that girl here, and keep your own visit short, or we could all pay the price for your presence." I felt the world was coming to an end, and what is it that my parents were asking me to do? The thought of something happening to my best friend and my parents was overwhelming. The more I thought about it, the more I needed a drink. My wiser choice, however, was to take care not to be easily spotted, and instead of taking the bus back to school, I drove my father's pickup truck. About a month or so later, I was returning home with the truck and decided to stop at the gas station nearby for fuel before continuing on home. I pulled into the station where one of my cousins worked, and I proceeded to pump fuel. It was the same gas station where my father and uncle purchased fuel for the log trucks and paid for it on Saturdays. After filling up, I went inside to pay. As I entered the station, I could see several white guys and my cousin sitting around talking. My cousin was sitting in a chair apart from the group. The owner of the station proceeded to get up and walk behind the counter. Once he saw who I was, he told me I didn't have to pay because he knew that my father would be there the following morning to pay for fuel purchased for the log trucks. I thanked him and turned to walk out. As I walked out, my cousin spoke up and asked, "Thomas, that couldn't have been you that got beat up on the steps of the courthouse in Jackson this week, could it? You look just fine." In fact, it was a it just it was just that week on Wednesday, December 4th, 1961, that a gentleman named Thomas Armstrong was beaten. The story in the Jackson Clarion Ledger on the following day reported that G.W. Heydrich, a white Hinds County bootlegger, pistol whipped a photographer named Thomas Armstrong at a demonstration on the steps of the courthouse in Jackson. I explained to my cousin that while I had not been the one beaten, I had been there to see it happen. Friends put the other Thomas, who was bleeding profusely, in a car and rushed him to the hospital. All the other men in the gas station began to join the conversation about what they had read in the newspapers that week about all the demonstrations going on in Mississippi. I didn't know if the owner ever caught on to the reason I lowered my voice at that point, but when I gave my cousin the full name of the guy who was beaten, I said softly, hoping others would not hear. Maybe my prayers were answered, since one of the white guys asked, "Are you Enoch's son?" "Yes, I'm Enoch Barnes's son," I replied and walked out, trying not to arouse suspicion. I knew that the men in the gas station only needed to get my real last name and I would be in big trouble. After all, it was well discussed in the community that most of the whites in Silver Creek were Klansmen. It is said that the Klan reached all the way into the Mississippi legislature. One guy particularly mentioned was Silver Creek's Billy Joe Lee, a white segregationist. There are two things that shielded me from the clutches of the segregationists. One was the fact that my last name was Armstrong, and the last name of my parents was Barnes. Second was the fact that a somewhat well-known black photographer named Thomas Armstrong and I had the same name. The segregationists in Silver Creek were confused. They had been notified that there was someone in the area of the country who was involved in the struggle. Then, when they first began to zero in on me, I was directly confronted by several of the local whites who asked if I was involved in particular situations that were occurring in Jackson, Mississippi. I lied and said no. It was the photographer. Even at that, I knew that they were getting close. A few weekends later, I risked coming home again. A cousin, Paul Taylor, and I went to the town of Monticello, Mississippi, to see other relatives and friends. They lived, of course, in the black section known as Peytontown. I was inside my friend's home where one of the guys I knew from the neighborhood came running in. He announced that there were 2 carloads of whites who had been driven down the block and were asking if anyone knew me and if I was in the area. My cousins thought that Paul and I shouldn't stick around and should travel the back route to our homes. Fortunately, the harassers did not return and we were able to proceed home safely. Now I knew for a certainty that the segregationists were on to me. After I pulled into Paul's driveway, we sat for a while discussing the events of the night. Eventually, Paul got out, and I was about to head home myself. He leaned into the car window and softly said, "I think you should leave this place." He has he was no doubt right, just as I knew that my decision to take part in the movement was the correct thing to do. Segregation was wrong, pure and simple. It was wrong because it allowed people to hate, and there is no place for hate in a just and right society. So, yeah, that ends that particular chapter and brings us into part 3, chapter 8. So, yeah. Yeah, he shows how dangerous it actually was to fight for civil rights, for equality, to be a part of the movement. Because there were some people who were so devoted to keeping things from changing. Because, you know, if you can always look down on someone and say their life is worse than mine, you don't always feel so bad about yourself. It's kind of like in school when a bully does things to bully people. It makes them feel better about their life, about them, even if they've got crap going on in their life. So, well, at least I'm not this punk. I can take out my frustrations on them. I mean, I hate for it to seem that simplistic, but more or less, that's what was going on. People just, yeah. But I'll go ahead and end this episode here. It was a short enough one. So, as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.